It's a fact, by the way, that this particular element, particularly Afghan, particularly Eritrean asylum seekers, have a particular problem with sexual assaults and sexual violence against women.
Okay,
well, it is a fact.
I've got the figures. Hold on a second, please.
It's an absolute fact. It's a fact.
Hold on.
It's reported that as a potential.
We all know your party is fine.
There is a clear double standards at play when it comes to protests. If it's a pro-Palestine protest, it's absolutely okay, but if it's individuals who are white and British that want to protest about illegal immigrants being in their country, it's something else. You know, it's demonized by the mainstream media. Now, over the summer, and still to this day, we are seeing peaceful protests still ongoing with regard to asylum seekers and just trying to push back on the government's stupid proposals that they put in place, whether it's digital ID or just the housing of illegal immigrants at asylum hotels. Now, in this debate, I like these debates because you can bring somebody on like a Reform MP that we're going to be listening to in a moment. The rest of them are what the establishment think. Now, she says a point, which we've seen per capita, by the way, that Afghans are responsible for the most sexual assaults per capita. That is a fact. But she mentions that, and the whole panel goes into meltdown and calls her racist and says that you can't say that. I don't understand why you can't say that when you're delivering statistics. That's actually true. Guys, have a watch of this meltdown, but as always, please do hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for more. Have a watch.
An Ethiopian asylum seeker has been charged with sexual assault and people have been protesting there. What do you say to the accusation?
Look, what I'd say generally to everybody is that I think this country is at potentially a boiling point with things like this. Do I understand how that sort of thing happens? Yes. Look at Northern Ireland only last week. Again, where you're going to get... It's a fact, by the way, that this particular element, particularly Afghan, particularly Eritrean asylum seekers, have a particular problem with sexual assaults and sexual violence against women.
Okay, well,
it is a fact.
I've got the figures. Hold on a second, please.
It's an absolute fact. It's a fact.
Hold on.
It's reported that as a potential.
We all know your party is fine.
As a percentage of the population, they are far higher and to offend. No, you can turn your nose up.
Absolute nonsense.
Like
so the context, Sarah.
They're putting women like me.
Sarah, just hold on one second.
That they should. You say you understand why they're there. Would you say to them they should go home?
The rioters.
Do you think they should stay outside?
Are you talking about the rioters?
Well, I'm talking about the people who are protesting outside the asylum.
The protesters I meant to say, not the rioters. I'm saying that I completely understand why people
I'm asking whether you think they should go home.
That if they're peacefully protesting, no, that's what this country's about. Anybody can peacefully protest. Okay?
It's obviously not turned into peaceful protest. So should they go home? Do you encourage them to go home?
If there's a peaceful... Can I just say what I want to say? If there's a peaceful protest, yes, that's what this country's all about. We let the pro-Palestinian protests continue, etc., etc. When those protests, in my view, potentially on purpose get infiltrated with people that want to cause civil unrest, that is a totally different thing. Antifa were there.
James Regan, your councillor. Do you think your councillor James Regan incited some of that violence?
Do you know about Antifa? No, they were there. Antifa were there.
They're not the reason why there was violence, right? And you've said yourself you understood why the violence happened.
There are bodies of people that will come in on purpose to incite
violence. And was your councillor one of those?
We need to have one at a time, please.
I think it's disappointingly evasive of the question I asked.
No, if they're peacefully protesting, fine.
But it's obvious that this turned into something that's more than a peaceful process.
Then the police need to get involved.
Right, and you think...
Well,
but you think that people should go home considering their protest has turned into something
that you say it wasn't intended? If it becomes violent, then of course it needs to be dispersed.
I think she has said that. Can I just give some context, please, around what you're talking about, the Afghan and Eritrean sexual offence convictions? So there were 129. They committed 129 offences over 3 years. And that is out of a total number of convictions where the nationality is known of 16,771. So that is the context around the numbers. I just think, we want to deal in facts. Chris.
So the police have been clear. To quote the police, this is mindless thuggery. And the idea that Sarah would say, I understand why people are doing that, rather than standing with the police...
You're government.
But there is no excuse for thuggery.
Sarah, please don't interrupt.
There is no excuse for violence and thuggery. Now, what we have to do, and it's also appalling to be raising the tensions on these issues rather than trying to deal with the actual issues, which is why I still cannot understand.
Then deal with it.
Why did you vote against our measures on tackling violence against women and girls? Why did you vote against that? We are moving as fast as possible after the legacy we were left to close these asylum hotels, which is another disaster zone, by the way, but which are opposed at every turn by the Conservatives and Reform, and who would instead rather exploit this for headlines. Actually, you need to be dealing with the issues in communities and supporting the police rather than saying you agree with the people being thugs.
Right.
In other news, Robert Jenrick will use his platform at the Conservative Party conference tomorrow to deliver one of his most striking policy proposals yet, a pledge to abolish the Sentencing Council. The Shadow Justice Secretary is expected to argue that the current body, which advises judges on sentencing guidelines, has contributed to what he describes as a two-tier nightmare in the British justice system. In his speech to delegates in Manchester, Mr. Jenrick will outline plans to put elected ministers rather than unelected officials in charge of setting sentencing policy. His argument centres on the belief that the council's work has undermined public confidence in equal justice and allowed ideology to seep into the legal process. He will tell the conference the Sentencing Council is not fit for purpose. Never again can the British people face the prospect of two-tier justice. The Sentencing Council, an independent body established to promote consistency in sentencing, was thrust into controversy earlier this year after issuing guidance that recommended judges consider factors such as ethnicity or gender when deciding whether to request a pre-sentence report. The guidance prompted backlash across the political spectrum, with critics warning it could lead to more lenient outcomes for offenders from certain backgrounds. Mr. Jenrick was among those who condemned the proposal, warning it risked undermining one of the core principles of British justice, equality before the law. He argued that it effectively encouraged lesser punishments on the basis of ethnicity. Following the outcry, the guidance was withdrawn, and the government later introduced legislation requiring any future sentencing guidelines to be approved by ministers before taking effect. Academic research has found evidence of disparities in sentencing outcomes, with some studies suggesting offenders from ethnic minorities are more likely to receive custodial sentences for certain offences, even when controlling for factors such as previous convictions or guilty pleas. However, Mr. Jenrick believes that the council's approach to addressing those disparities is fundamentally flawed and risks deepening divisions rather than closing them. He is expected to tell delegates, "We are slipping into a two-tier nightmare under Keir Starmer. All too frequently, the law is not applied equally. No more. Every single person in this country must be treated exactly the same, regardless of their background." The former immigration minister will also accuse the Sentencing Council of watering down punishments by recommending sentencing ranges that fall short of the maximum penalties permitted by Parliament. He will argue that this trend has contributed to a culture of leniency in the courts, further fueling public frustration over perceived failures in law and order. In response, a Labour Party spokesperson dismissed the remarks as yet more rank hypocrisy, pointing out that the Conservatives had supported the very changes they now criticise. The Conservatives backed the proposed changes to pre-sentencing reports when they were announced and did nothing to stop them when they were in government, the spokesperson said. Labour took action the moment we uncovered their mistake. This is just another cynical gimmick from Jenrick, a man who constantly undermines the independence of the judiciary just to further his own career. Mr. Jenrick also hinted that his speech would include criticism of Attorney General Lord Richard Hermer KC, telling a Fringe event on Monday, "I'm going to talk about my particular bête noire, the Attorney General." His comments suggest that tensions between the Shadow Justice Secretary and the government's top legal officer will be a focal point of his address. The remarks come on the third day of a party conference aimed at demonstrating unity amid poor polling numbers and speculation over leadership stability. Despite persistent rumours of discontent, Mr. Jenrick has publicly pledged his support for Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader. When asked on Monday whether he would consider standing for the leadership himself, he dismissed the suggestion outright. There isn't a vacancy, and I don't expect there will be. My expectation is that Kemi will lead this party into the next general election. What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you've not yet already, make sure you do drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British content. Thank you, take care, goodbye.